So official
John, how you
tonight,
doing?
sit in this desk. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. And I'm going to start off by saying, everybody got the packet?
Yes.
Yeah, and printed it out, all right, excellent. First item on the agenda,
As attendance.
we're skipping over the approval of minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we go back to
Yes,
attendance and
attendance.
just have a, Kara O'Connell,
Here?
Lorianne Taylor Branco. Here. Michelle Dion.
Here.
Joseph Olivera.
Yeah.
Robert Smith.
Here.
And present is our attorney, John Coughlin, as well as Marie Marasco, Economic Development Director for the RDA.
So the next item on the agenda, which is the financial update, our operating budget and financial reports, the warrant schedule, and the audit, which are pages 1 through 6. Maria, what would you like to tell us about all this one stuff?
Okay, actually, if I might ask Madam Chair to acknowledge that the approval, that we're going to postpone approval of minutes until the fall subsequent meeting.
Yes.
And that has to do with just the transition of having a stenographer and access on the television. So financial updates. In your packages, as you see on pages 1 through 6, are a proposed operating budget and financial reports. Let me open up my notebook. This budget, as you know, again, we're in a bit of a transition. So first of all, I'm going to say, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me say that. It's wonderful to see you all. Second, we are clearly in a transition period of trying to, and thank the city very much for their assistance in supporting the RDA and making a transition for what they were able to do, yeoman service, over to what the RDA expects and what I expect to provide to the RDA. So with that being said, you have a financial update here, which is a proposed FY19 operating budget. It was proposed, it was drafted by Mike Dion, who's been doing yeoman service. What I'd like for you to do, if appropriate, is to approve the budget with the understanding that the Economic Development Director will be submitting proposed amendments to line item as needed. And that is simply a function of, I haven't had a chance to dig in to the actual numbers and tie them all together. So if that is appropriate, I would like a motion from the chair to approve the operating budget as entitled Proposed FY19 Operating Budget, July 1, 19 through June 30th, 2020, for a total of $534,858, with the understanding that the executive director might be requesting an amendment as needed.
I don't have any problem with that, because like I said, she recently just started. She's going to dig her hands into all those boxes that we were handed by our last consultant, which is a major project. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or complaints before we go to a motion on that? Tom, have anything to say?
No, none at all. I make the motion.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed?
Thank you.
So that
Again, I expect to be able to dig into this within the next couple of months. So just an FYI, how am I going to make that happen? I have ordered QuickBooks, and it is my intention to provide this board with accurate financial statements, including balance sheets and income statements on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I make one statement before we continue? I think I would really like, well, I want to welcome you, number one. And I know that you did hit the ground running, and you have been very diligent while you've been the short time that you've been here. But I'd also like to thank Mike Dion, because Mike Dion helped us tremendously on his own time. He's a very professional man who does impeccable work, and he gave us the transparency and brought our financial disclosure to the level it needed to be at. And I'm sure that's going to assist our director greatly in your endeavor moving forward.
Yeah, Mike has done a wonderful job. He deserves a ton of credit. If I was his boss, I'd give him a raise.
There you go.
I would too.
I do have one question for you on the warrant, so,
Yep.
On this, by giving you a little leeway to dig in,
Yeah.
we're still gonna pay our bills, is that correct?
Yes, we are. And then, what I have for you, is actually to, the warrant, which has been, which was, already approved by the vice chair, just for availability reasons. And I want to bring to your attention that, of the warrant items submitted, for a total of $250,983.04, that this board needed to comply with its settlement agreement and pay the PAR invoices. That was under the terms and condition. Says the settlement agreement, the terms say the Fall River Redevelopment Authority promises to pay any subsequent PAR invoices associated with the project, and it's closed out within 30 days of the effective date of the settlement agreement. So, we, to comply with that and with the vice chair's understanding, and I believe acknowledgement, we only released those particular invoices. The other checks have not yet been released. It's to approve the warrant as submitted, and ratifying the release of the PAR checks to comply with the settlement agreement.
So did you get Mike Leon had swung by and picked up from Bisco to get paid for some of the money that he is due? And I'm just wondering, I didn't see that anywhere in the packet.
I
handed
haven't.
it to Michael to get paid so that we could get Bisco, some of the money that he's requesting. So, have you not seen that yet? Do we need to follow up with Michael?
I
Find out
will.
How come you haven't seen that yet?
I will say to you that I am confident if Mike Dion said that he dropped it off, he may have, but it might just be a timing issue that it didn't get into your packet. So it would be, if that's it, we'll get it on the next warrant, and if it's time sensitive, I'll alert you all.
Okay.
And how much is that, just so we know how much we're talking about? So I fully understand that the warrant right now does not cover any payment to Cisco, so how much are we expecting to be paid?
I thought it was my understanding it was only the retainage.
Right, well, I think they're substantially
if-
complete at this point.
again, in the
They're pretty much done, I believe.
Yeah.
So I think he's,
Because we're in the transition, maybe we could ask Kathy if she has any.
It
she has
is
any
the balance
information.
of the retainage.
Yeah.
And what is that total again, Kathy, for the record, please?
$140,000. Let me get you the exact amount, I'm just going to.
Yeah, so again,
so is there any specific reason why it didn't get on here that we pay Mr. Bisco?
Timing.
Timing?
Yeah, the invoice was received, but we were waiting for the letter from PAR acknowledging that the punch list items had been completed and that there had been full compliance on behalf of the contractor before the payment was issued, so.
Okay.
So it's fair to state that within the next few days, we will be cutting a check for $140,000.
I'm gonna get you the exact, it's approximately $140,000. It's the balance. You released half the retainage.
So you have the punch list is
$2,000.
$92,000.
This is the balance of the retainage.
I'm just trying to get an understanding of how much money it is going out. I mean, we do have this warrant for $250 and $983. So in addition to that, we have the $140 that is also going out within this month, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, he finished the job, he
Okay.
submitted everything, we should pay him.
So do you want it as a separate item, for a separate line item for the warrant, or included in the next warrant?
Well, next
with-
meeting's not gonna be a month, so, I mean, I think that we, as a board, what do y'all think? I mean, he's done with the job, he submitted the paperwork, PAR signed off.
If the job is done and we are planning to cut the check within a couple of days, I would just say let's amend this warrant to reflect the total money going out.
Now, tell me, do you normally vote this as a motion, or is it an administrative matter?
It's a motion to approve the warrant.
Motion.
Okay, so a motion to approve the warrant with an amendment to add the BISCO bills that have been verified by the chair.
Been verified by par verified.
So near as we can tell, the balance of the retained is
$147,798.78.
Kathy, could you repeat that? You.
Sure. $147,798.78.
Is that one invoice or is it a
the
number of?
balance of the
That's the
retainage.
balance of retainage. All right,
He's
so,
already been compensated for the work that he.
okay, I just want to be able to match it up.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
So can I just ask one question? So this is just for the retainage. We don't have the bill yet for the work he finished on the drainage and everything on the city pier? The 170?
I haven't seen that bill come across to
Okay,
me.
okay.
This is just for looking him for the.
For the retainage, okay.
And again, I was, again, this is a transition item relying upon what was prepared in order, and then to get you to this meeting, and then the
We're gonna learn.
transition.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're gonna learn.
Should we pay him all his retainage, even though he's still doing the drainage work?
Well, it's two
Release fund.
separate line items.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
two separate line items.
Okay.
Audit 2017, do you have any update on that, or is that another thing you're digging your heels into, and you're gonna kind of figure out what we're,
I do, actually, if I can back up 1 second and just give you an updated balance in your checkbook. As of today, because this just came in today, as of June 14th, you have $2,342,891.77 in your business analysis account. And in your regular checking account, you have $183,889.62. So again, this just received today. And just want to let you know that, again, once I get things loaded up on a real accounting software that I've actually used before, make you feel better, I put myself through law school working at a Big 8, used to be a Big 8 law, accounting firm, so I kind of know what I'm doing, so. So the audit, yes, I did hear from, you asked, board member asked that we include that in the update today. Received an email from Jennifer Cook of Clifton Larson Allen, the firm that was retained, and we had a brief conversation, and the only thing that is apparently holding up the audit is filling in some values of the property that the RDA once owned. I'm a little surprised. However, with the assistance of Attorney Coughlin, we were able to we'll go back through at least one deed and try to get the sale price, but apparently, again, we're going to dig in. There's missing information. I don't think that's any surprise.
No.
So my goal is, again, once we create the balance sheet, will be a schedule of assets as of today, and then for purposes of your audit, I'm assuming the auditors are going to give you all that detailed information as well. So I will be meeting with her next week. Any questions that you wish me to ask her, just obviously forward your questions.
I think the only question that, any of us would have is, because we haven't done an audit since 2008, are we gonna have any penalties for not having done them? Can you just ask her that?
I will inquire. All right, you all know, might be a little rough this first time going out, but I'm gonna, so if I'm flipping through a lot of pages, I think it's only because I've had to go borrow office supplies for books and get, even file folders. All right. So with that,
Next, anybody else have any other questions about the audit?
good.
project updates, and the first one is the Old Second Street project. And I see that Bill Roth is here. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Have a seat in the hot seat.
I met with the landscape architect and the contractor about a week and a half ago. We went through the punch list of items, and there's just a very few minor things. Some of the plants, I didn't get the minutia. Some of the plants were quite small, or a handful of them, so they've swapped those out. And there was one of the metal screens was mounted high, and it's supposed to be mounted low. So it's very minor punch list items. And then one more item will remain, will be the irrigation contractor will be meeting with, because facilities maintenance will be taking over. So they're gonna, Chris Gallagher and his plumber and myself will be meeting with the irrigation contractor. Once those items have been addressed, the landscape architect will sign off on it, and then we'll do a final payment. So, but we're down to just very minor things, and that project I anticipate should be closed out shortly.
So now this is all gonna be done within the dollar amount that we agreed to in the fall? There's no extra,
I know of no other change orders than the last change order.
No, I haven't received anything.
No, this is all within whatever the dollar amount and the change orders. There's no additional change orders. The punch list items are just items that they need to
Right.
fulfill.
okay, very good.
And we all received a letter from Councilor Steve Kamara. Did everybody receive that letter attesting to the residents, the safety concerns behind the area, behind the Academy building?
Regarding the lighting, yes, and I have forwarded that on to, because part of the transfer of the parking decks, and I wanted to thank John for giving me all the deeds and everything. I need a legal degree to read them and the maps. That took me a while, but I finally, I figured it out. I finally saw which ones were which. So Old Second Street was part of the transfer, it was part of the deed for the parking deck that's adjacent to it. The Third Street Garage, is that what it's called? So, that's under the purview now of the city. And that, facilities maintenance, Chris Gallagher will be, that will be under his jurisdiction for maintenance. And I forwarded this on to him, and we've had conversations. So, I mean, some of the things they're looking at, he initially talked about, we're possibly putting up some, wiring up some lighting that's on the parking deck that shines there. Talking with, he also wants to talk with the apartment owners to possibly put an outside light, a similar, what they call wall pack light on their building that would shine on some areas as an entrance into their issues. And then we have discussed, he didn't realize that there is power that is run, there's some small outlets that are run along the edge of the landscaping. And so we haven't gone out there, but he thinks that a pole could be added, and LED lighting, since it could be taken, we could take, since LED doesn't draw a lot of power, he could have the electrician tap off. So these are all the options that he's, he quickly looked at. So but he will be looking at that, and I'm confident that Mr. Gallagher will then get back and address that.
So the safety concerns.
The safety concerns, but it really needs to go to, obviously, it's, you guys don't own it anymore, so it's really the city's responsibility now, and it's under the purview of Mr. Chris Gallagher and facilities maintenance. But
Thank you for
we
that.
did come up with some ideas.
Just wanted to make sure that it got addressed. I mean, obviously, we want to see.
Well, it hasn't been addressed, it's been acknowledged,
Acknowledged.
and I think they're discussing solutions for it.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for him regarding the Old Second Street project?
Is that closed already? Did we have a closing on that? Is it already transferred to the city?
Oh, yeah, those deeds have been.
So we're off the,
Oh, yes,
good.
a couple of months ago.
You're on your own.
Oh, well, maybe we'll do a change order for lighting. Yeah, there was a change order for lighting. You didn't see that one.
Thank you very much for the update.
Okay.
Millstone Medical?
Oh, so I'm
You're
next?
still on.
Okay.
Yeah, Millstone Medical's next.
Oh, I didn't print the agenda, so I can, no, I know. So Millstone Medical, you have, I prepared a brief memo detailing it's rather ironic, the project is gonna go through, it's going through our site plan review process, which is through the planning division. But also, there's a separate deed and site plan and DHCD agreement for these. So I think I was pretty diligent. I just kind of went one by one how the project meets it, and I feel it does. I also included in there the attachments, because you probably don't know what your requirements are and those deed requirements, so I included those, so just for reference. I'm recommending, I feel that it meets it. We're almost finished our review and gonna probably within the beginning of next week issue an approval. So I'm recommending that you approve the project as submitted. I do have a large copy if you wish to see it, but I brought our site plan file. As you can see, it's a pretty large document. So, but I believe they complied with everything.
So, actually, as a footnote, this was one of the companies with which I worked in my previous role. And I went out and met with them, actually seen this site. And I think, again, once again, it's all good things in Fall River. So I have a recommended vote for a motion to approve the Millstone Medical Lot 5 expansion project as submitted under a memo from William Roth to the RDA dated 6/4/19, and grant a waiver to the minimum building coverage requirement of 20% and allow a 7.3% building coverage at 580 and 630 Current Road.
I make a motion to approve the project as described.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Status of urban renewal plans.
We're close. Actually, we had a conference call this afternoon on it, and one item was remaining. There's a 1979 waterfront plan, and some of the area of that urban renewal plan overlaps with the waterfront plan. And in our conversations, we're recommending to Harriman that to add some language in the plan that says where the overlap is with the 1979 plan, that the current urban renewal plan will supersede those. Because the other urban renewal plan is in perpetuity, so we're just going to supersede just the section that it overlaps. With that, then Harriman is going to be tomorrow. She's going through one final checklist. There's certain MEPA, which is the Mass Environmental Policy Act, that some of the filings that are needed, and she's just going to make sure that we've provided her everything, and they're kind of, it's really kind of the dotting the i's and crossing the t's. It's like a copy of the agenda of the public hearing, the copy of the minutes from the public hearing. I believe I've given her all of that whenever they've requested that. So she's going to go through, and then if there's anything missing, then we'll get it. But it's those types of issues. It's nothing substantive. It's the formula and formatic.
Right, and my understanding was that since the consultant had been keeping DHCD apprised all along, that the final review process will be not, I don't want to say shorter, because I
Right.
really don't know the reference
Right.
point, but it should move along more
Right.
quickly
Yeah,
than typically.
yeah,
Because
typically-
they have been looking at it all along.
Yeah, typically, if they hadn't seen the plan, it would take 2 to 3 months for them to get their initial review out. But they've seen a draft of it, and they've actually commented and then made changes. So Ms. Inez felt that once they wrap up these final issues, that since they've already seen it, they've already reviewed it, that, it will not take, that longer review time, is what she hoped. I know that the one thing that we do have to do is, once we get everything ready to go, there is we'll have to get the final plan or the final draft, get it to the print shop downstairs, and then it's a huge printing because we have to mail a copy to everyone on the MIPA distribution. I see your smile. We have to mail a copy to everyone on the MIPA distribution list. And we've got to do that twice because there's two applications. One's the waterfront and one's the downtown. So, but I kind of got the sense that once I get the list towards the end of the week, we'll get whatever we need to her by the end of the week, or, next week's a short week also with the 4th of July. But I'm thinking that we'll be printing and mailing the week after the 4th of July to the MIPA list. That's pretty much,
It's good news.
that's
Really
kind of
is.
where I think we left it, in that hopefully we'll have everything ready to go and they'll have the final version to us that, right before the 4th of July. Obviously, right after that, that Monday, that beginning of that next week, we'll get it printed and then get it all distributed and mailed.
Great. Thank
Unless
you.
John wants to distribute it and mail it.
It's all yours.
Any questions for Mr. Wells while he's here? Because that was the last thing that he needed to update us on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
You
Bill.
too.
Thank you.
Bill.
You're welcome.
Again, I also want a little shout out to Bill, who was very welcoming and prepared to, answer my questions, and I look forward to working with him.
I do as well.
Looking forward.
So the next item is the City Pier project, which everybody has read the pages that were submitted to us, that the punch list items were done, approved them. We did have our site visit, which was very educational for everybody involved. The woman from, just to update everybody, the woman from the state has called a couple times. And I'm going to forward again, information purposes, a link that she emailed me showing everything that has been filed from 2011. She had been out of the office on some sites, so she emailed it to me, so I'll forward, and you can click on everything, and you can read what we did, the date we did it, and it actually does say when the licensed site professional submitted their resignation from the project. So she said the very first thing that we needed to do, give her the correct address and lead contact person. So, because we're a board of 5, we've just hired Maria, she agreed that it would be best for Maria to be her contact person. We are gonna get a letter of non-compliance in the mail. She heard my silence. She said, don't worry about it. I have to issue one. But she said they're gonna be very lenient with us on the dates of the deadlines that we need to submit the paperwork to them. Normally, it's a very tight window, short, but they understand a little bit of what we've been going through. And I thought that both her and the woman from the EPA were more than lenient with us.
Mhm.
They're gonna do everything basically possible to help us, make sure that we hit all of our benchmarks. And again, we all heard that if we decide the end goal can be a massive project, but if we want to veer off in the meantime and do slightly small temporary projects, the licensed site professional will just say to her, look, we're not changing our end goal, we're just taking a little detour right now, but the end goal is still going to be the same, and they'll guide us, and she seems very open to working with us. She said almost you can take a line almost down the center of the property if you're facing the water in the left-hand side. If we go through the licensed site professional and say, hey, we want to put grass down with a walkway, she doesn't see any reason why, as long as they upload all of the necessary soil samples and everything that she's outlining. So Maria, you're going to get a letter that we're in noncompliance. She's also been saying that for 2 years, she's been mailing letters to our former consultant that we've been in noncompliance, and we haven't gotten any.
Yeah, so,
Did you already receive her letter?
no, so again, it's the transition, and I know that Kathy.
Kathy, did you receive her letter? No. No, it's coming.
No, so I actually, if you don't mind, I'm inviting Kathy to actually fill in additional information.
So, in speaking with the EPA representative, she indicated to us that she had not yet received the PAR reports. You know, PAR did samplings as they were completing the project. She had not yet received those, echoed the chairwoman's comments about we need a licensed site professional on board. I did speak with PAR. They did have their own licensed site professional on site that day. We were interested in hiring Apex because they were your original LSP. However, they are not inclined to get back involved with the project. PAR does have an LSP. In the interest of time and efficiency, I did speak with them. They will be sending a proposal that the board will have to approve, indicating that for $30,000, they would provide the LSP services. And when we looked at the scope of the work, they would basically just be reviewing existing reports, making determinations on the allowable uses based on compliance with the remediation that had been outlined. If additional testing were required, which EPA, DEP may require once they've reviewed the documents that they have on hand, if there was additional testing, or if there was to be a change in use, that would necessitate an increased dollar amount. PAR had indicated that the LSP has to, as the chairwoman stated, the LSP has to basically determine the suitability of the remediation for the intended use. And if the board is interested in, and we'll use the most recent conversation about allowing the public access to the property, that constitutes a use which is different from the marine-related boat launch use that was in the original application. PAR indicated to me that it would be very beneficial and more cost-effective if the board wanted to include a change in use as part of those services. That needs, the way they interpret the data that they're going to be reviewing, they can look at it with an eye towards these alternate uses when they're going through it. And that it might be more beneficial to do that as they were completing their review now, as opposed to waiting until some future point in time. So the question was simply, does the Redevelopment Authority want the LSP to go forward and evaluate the reports that have been compiled based on the original use, which was marine-related and boat launch, or do they, and/or perhaps, do they want the LSP to look at other alternative uses similar to what had been discussed
So,
previously?
I guess I have a couple thoughts on all of this.
Sure.
I mean, we met down there, the project's been a massive project for a long period of time. Should we talk to someone else besides PAR being an LSP? I mean, not for anything, but PAR is some of the reason we spent almost $2 more million than we should have spent. So there's got to be maybe another engineering company with fresh eyes that we could use, because we're over, whether anybody made a mistake, I don't know, we'll never know. But we spent a lot more money on that site, and PAR was overseeing it. So that's just something I'm throwing out there. The second thing is, we have Fourth Engineering working for us right now that, some of us were supposed to meet with, and they're supposed to help us, say, you could do this, you could do that. It was my understanding on the site visit that we already have, Bob, isn't that your understanding? We already have the Marina
Yeah.
Chapter 91B license.
Permitted,
to,
expired, but it-
It's been permitted, it's part of it. We can stop putting
I have a
pilings and
question.
slips in.
Yeah. Did Apex give you a reason why they don't want to do business with us? Because it just doesn't make sense to me a company would walk away from a $30,000 job and say, I don't want to do business with you anymore.
From what I understand, obviously, they were subcontractor of PAR. And when PAR's contract did not get extended, which it's just recently been extended as part of the settlement agreement, but when the PAR contract was not extended, Apex was not comfortable continuing to provide services without a contract and a guarantee of payment. So they left under strained conditions, we could say.
Someone from the state recommended to me that we have Maria reach out directly to Apex, not working in conjunction under PAR, because she felt like you just said, the terms that they
Right.
parted ways were not favorable, but that it might be to the benefit of the board to have Apex back on board. So, I mean, Maria, I'd love for you to call them. I mean, I don't have a problem calling them. I mean, I can say, hey, you were the people doing this. We're so sorry that none of us knew. I mean, and I looked back in some of my history, and when they were told that there were no funds, RDA had over $3 million in the bank. We had $3 million in the bank, and they were told their contract wasn't getting extended because we didn't have the funds, and we didn't even know about it. Nobody even asked us to extend the contract. So I don't know if you say, hey, look, changing of the guards, we're all new, we're fresh. This is like a major project for us. We want to move forward, positive, happy. The state already likes you. And again, I'm not quite sure personally, as everybody has their own opinion, how much faith I have in PAR working to the betterment of us on this project. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say? Any other comments or
I
anything?
agree with you. I go back to Apex, because the learning curve would be a lot shorter for them. They've been involved in the project. Maybe they can do it a better job in shorter time for the same money or less. So is there any reason you can think we wouldn't go back to them again?
Yeah, there's some additional considerations. So the LSP that's brought on board now is going to be asked to review data from 2017 that was compiled by PAR. They didn't do their own testing. Had they stayed on site, they would have been doing their own sampling right along. They did not because they parted company. PAR was doing some sampling. So I'm just suggesting that you're going to be asking a new vendor, even if it's Apex, to come in and review the data that's been collected by PAR and make a determination on the suitability of that data. There could be some reluctance and some hesitancy, and that may have been part of. I agree if Apex is willing, because they brought it all the way to 2017, but there was work completed after that fact. So that's one consideration. Certainly worth the conversation with them, but they will be relying on PAR's data to be making their findings. So that could be a challenge for them. The second side of it is you're looking at the cost factor. If they have to do additional work, I don't know that it would be a large amount of increased cost, but you have to anticipate that PAR doing it where it's already their data, they've already collected their data, obviously they, working with their own internal LSP, the cost may be less. I mean, the $30,000 was a negotiated amount that we made with them. They started a little bit higher, and that was negotiated downwards. So it may be, now, I don't think it would be cost prohibitive, so if you'd feel more comfortable with somebody else, then by all means, just bear in mind there might be an increased cost, but I would be more concerned about finding someone, and the timing too. I don't know if there's any interest in moving it forward, sooner rather than later. If you get a new LSP, it might take them a little more time to get up to speed and, get the evaluations done. And it hasn't yet been determined, even in talking to EPA, that whether or not they're going to require additional testing. So, they haven't made that decision yet. So they're waiting to see what data has been compiled. So you've got maybe some timing issues too.
And that data was fixed in time. There's no way to go back and replicate that. That was
No,
data that was done.
it's exactly, and it's
Have to
since
use
been
that data.
buried or depending upon the status of it. So obviously you've got.
You have to use that data.
Or again, if they could require additional borings and testings, but that's going to get a lot more expensive. So I can appreciate, the sensitivity with PAR, believe me, I know the history. But I think and you do want EPA to feel comfortable with whichever LSP is brought on board, so that's also a consideration. But I think, again, getting a new entity in to review somebody else's data and be willing to
issue or finding based on that may in fact be a challenge, so.
Go ahead, John.
Can I just make a comment? I suggest that we maintain continuity here, because if we can use ours data, I believe that's going to be the best path moving forward. Because if we bring somebody else that is new, that will be challenging everything that has been done in the past, and now we need to take additional samples, dig the whole place up, and so on, it's just going to take us backwards. So I would suggest that we maintain continuity, try to keep some of the players that have been involved and try to work with them, unless we see something that tells us that we need to change because there are significant reasons to make a change. But just to make a change because we had some issues in the past, that we didn't agree with some of these people and how they handle things, I think we need to put that behind us and think what is the best path to move forward. And I believe that we need to maintain continuity and use whatever data that park has collected over the years. Hopefully that data is valid and it will be accepted.
I think we'd have to find an LSP willing to use that data, is that right?
Yes, I mean, that would be extremely important, because if they have to start going back and doing additional sampling just to satisfy their own professional integrity, then that clearly could be not only at cost, time, and again, I don't know that they'd be comfortable otherwise.
You can always switch in the future, you need to get yourself up to date.
Right. Michelle, do you have something to say?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
These LSPs, the licensed site professional, I don't have any experience with them at all. Is there a fair amount of them, or is it a small pool?
Oh,
Is it-
no, I mean, you could
There's
certainly
plenty
find
of them,
others, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could certainly find others, yeah.
Okay.
But again, whether they're going to be,
Yeah.
you're not really asking them to do the work, you're right.
It's a big ask.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, you're asking them to make a decision on somebody else's data, so.
Mike, I guess at this point, essentially, we're backpedaling again because we should be much further along than we are. We're going backwards again to move forward. So with that, the amount of data is unknown until PAR comes forth with all of their data. The validity of the data is unknown until it's presented. So I suppose I'd be a little hesitant also at bringing somebody new on board right now, based on the fact that we don't know what the data is, we don't know the validity of the data, and we don't know the time constraints on the data. And I think we need to know those components. Now, speaking on the site visit, it was my impression, the south side and the north side are two totally different issues. The contaminants were either, not only, but the high concentration was on the north side, not the south side. So essentially, we could use the south side moving forward as a temporary measure until the big picture. It appeared that it potentially could be grassed in because the contaminants may not be at the level that the federal government is concerned with, which would allow us to do that. I don't think we need to be in a hurry for anything at this point. I think we need to just do it properly, and our main thing was let the community use it until it becomes the real project. To have that shut down after spending $7 million is absolutely absurd.
Well, I actually would like to say that the safety of the public is paramount, obviously, which you all agree, and which I have come across and what I have been able to read. So, again, there's no hurry
Right,
until the safety of the user is ensured.
correct.
Okay, whoever it might be. So, I just want to.
Yeah,
So
but
just
you're
to,
right. But with that in mind, yes, obviously, yeah, that is
Obviously.
paramount.
No, I just
but-
wanted to
Yep,
just
no,
repeat what you have been saying all along.
Yep.
Yeah.
so just to step back then to the earlier consideration then, so what PAR is asking, the LSP, you have to make a decision if you'd like the LSP to consider a different use on the south side, because when they're reviewing the data, it has to obviously reach a higher standard. If it's going to be a lot more public accessible, more recreational use, as opposed to the marine-related use, what he was suggesting is that it's more cost-effective if the board has a decision as to whether or not you want to tried to suggest to EPA that one portion, the more highly contaminated portion, would reach a certain level for one type of use, whereas the southern portion, if you'd like to pursue it, they would look at it with an eye towards what would need to be done to the southern portion in order to allow that change in use. Now, all that has to be approved, not just environmentally by EPA regarding contamination, but it also has to be approved by DEP waterways and your Chapter 91 license as well. But the first step is the environmental
I
piece.
certainly see no reason not to have it fully encompassed. I mean, why wouldn't you want to know everything?
So there'll just be an added cost if they're looking at it for dual use and evaluating for dual
So
different
back to
purposes.
the question, we're paying Foth Engineering to give us ideas, right? That was the whole thing. Where's Foth?
All right, so
It's gonna be the next thing.
Forth had asked to meet with a subcommittee, or we're not calling it a subcommittee, right? We're just calling a couple of representatives. Yeah, to go over, their progress, and they had offered to meet, and then there wasn't a follow-up regarding who the members were that were going to actually be.
I believe that Bob and I agreed to,
Yeah,
Could do on a
we do.
Saturday, if it couldn't be a
Yeah.
Saturday.
And they said they would be happy to do a Saturday, so we did check on
It
that,
just seems
so.
like we agreed to pay them
Yeah.
thousands
Right.
of dollars
Can we back up
to.
for one?
So
second?
they're, just to distinguish then, so they're gonna be looking at moving forward and how the marina might be configured, and you know best what that scope is. The licensed site professional is speaking to use. So they're actually doing two separate things. I think the current use that Forth would be looking at, the marine-related use, is already part of your Chapter 91, and it's the standard that was originally driving the plan and the design of the project's
Right, but if you also
construction.
look- If you look back to the meeting when Foth was sitting here, they also did say that they would look into putting a building on the site.
Correct,
It's my
right.
understanding that they have, 3 ideas
Mhm.
on where we could put a building on the site.
Yeah,
So-
which, yeah.
Which
Again,
we were originally told
I
was
think,
not
Which
I
that
possible.
think-
contradicts
I
what we
think,
did before.
It completely contradicts what we were told before. So, I mean, I think we need to get an LSP on board as soon as possible.
Good, all right.
And then have Maria and a
Mhm.
couple of board members sit with Foth, see what they've come up with. I mean, we all know we want the marina inside, we already have the license for it. So, but the LSP, we need yesterday.
Yes,
I have
yeah.
a question about that.
Yeah.
The LSP, I see this letter from PAR, and it's signed by the principal there, and he says he's an LSP. So did you say PAR is willing to be the LSP for $30,000?
Yes,
And they'll definitely use their own data?
yes, they have an LSP within their organization who would, and again, the $30,000 number was assuming no additional testing and no pursuit of a change in use. So now, if you decide that you want them to evaluate the southern section of the pier for public access, that will constitute a change in use, and there may be an added cost for that, so.
So if PAR is an LSP...
And we're gonna be getting something in writing from them, I didn't get it.
If PAR is an LSP, why would they have hired Apex, an outside LSP, to work for them instead of doing it themselves in the first place?
I can't speak to how that could have happened.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
The same
doesn't
re-
make
same-
sense.
I'm like,
the
how-
same
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
why we paid
Yeah.
someone to oversee Second Street when the
Right.
architect was overseeing Second Street.
So now we're going back to our original contractor,
Could
who
have
hired a
been.
subcontractor to do this work. And I understand Kara's unwillingness to probably go forward with them, and I probably feel the same way about...
I'm just skeptic.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my question is,
Again.
if they've been taking
Yeah.
the soil samples, why are we paying $30,000 more?
Yeah, because
For
I guess
something that was
the answer
done.
is PAR is the only one that'll use
Or
that
has been
data.
done.
Nobody else is going to use their data.
So
It's
there's.
my understanding
Yeah,
from,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and I
Yeah.
spoke last Friday with Catherine from the state,
Right.
that we can take shortcuts, or we can, I mean, we all heard her analogy, you might be heading to Florida, but you're gonna stop at the campground in Georgia for a couple of days, and then you're gonna get back on the highway, and then you're gonna, continue down. But, the end use is the same. The state is willing to let us veer off for temporary uses. Whatever those temporary uses are, we haven't determined yet. It's the end use, and I think Foth is gonna be a big help on whether or not we can put a building on the site. We've been being told for years, we can't. So honestly, from my perspective, to stand on that site, at that site review, and have DEM and EPA tell me if you practically cut it in half, the south side's not contaminated? And we can
Yeah.
apply and almost do whatever we want? I was like,
As long as we get it approved.
as long as we get it
gonna
approved.
be-
Right,
But I honestly
correct,
stood there in
yeah.
shock, because for years and years and years, we're sitting here being told, you
Oh,
can't do
yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I
You
can't
do
speak
anything.
to
It's a
that.
parking lot.
Yeah, I can
And for them to say marine use,
Right.
there's no boat ramp there.
No.
So whoever approved the final plans, there's no boat ramp, you're not launching boats there. So the state was just as shocked to stand on that property and see that it's gonna be, someday the marina plan, but you're not having a travel lift go over and lift boats in and out of the water.
No.
And that's what they were expecting. They were expecting a boat ramp, travel lift. They were expecting something that, she looked at that site and she was like, holy cow. This doesn't have what we were told it had.
Mhm.
So I think all along, the plan's been a building, and I think, my perspective, LSP, if it's par, and we all agree with par, tell them to get on board tomorrow. Fourth, Maria, Bob, Joe, sit with them. Let's see what we can do, let's get moving. We seem to just waste time. It's time to move forward, get something beautiful in the center of the city.
So we would just need direction from the board as to whether you want them to pursue evaluation for use as marine-related activity on the northern, we'll call it, side, and then to also pursue allowable use on the southern side of the property for public access, I'll call it, for whatever. I mean, we just need to give the LSP, whomever it is, some direction as to whether you want them to evaluate it for a change in use, because as you know, the original use was marine-related. They can do that, but again, they apply different standards, and that's what they're doing. It's all analytics at this point, if they're gonna be using.
We need to have a meeting, call another meeting, and have them come.
Okay, so we'll.
And
Call
sit
another
with us.
meeting and have PAR come?
If we vote to hire PAR to be the LSP, to sit with us, because obviously we will have marine-related use if we put in slips and docks. I mean, there was a building, the plans were taken away from us, and we never got to keep them. But, there was a building overlooking on a dock with a harbor master office, laundry facilities. 3 new members, but Joe, you remember, it was beautiful, right?
So let me act like I've never heard about this before. Oh, I don't think I've really heard about this before. So, in order for this board to move forward with what it wants to do, which makes it a beautiful or a useful, productive site for the residents of Fall River, it requires a licensed site professional
Yep.
to evaluate the data, to determine whether or not the intended use of marine-related services are in compliance with DEP and EPA requirements. And 2, the subsequent question is whether or not this board wants PAR to consider at the same time, when doing this information, please review alternative use. And again, do you want to say specifically for one side of the pier?
I think so,
Is that the
yes,
consensus?
yeah. The site that's not as
What sounds
contaminated,
So
yeah.
I think
Very
that's
first thing,
what's on the table.
the very first thing,
Okay.
they need to get us in compliance. There are so many reports that need to get uploaded onto DEP and EPA site. That's the very first thing they need to do.
All right, so
Because
walk me-
we are behind now 2 years. We're 2 years behind in uploading reports onto their site.
So item 1, getting
So-
compliance. and making it compliant.
Yeah, so just to be clear, it wasn't PA's responsibility to file those reports. It
No,
was
but
the
I'm saying
LSP's
that
responsibility.
She just said,
Right,
we get the LSP,
exactly.
their first thing is to upload every
Absolutely.
single thing that gets us in
Yeah,
compliance.
absolutely.
Because we're gonna have deadlines. The letter that she's gonna send, that Maria's gonna receive any single day, is gonna have deadlines
Mm-hmm.
for us. And they're gonna be very generous with those, not generous if we miss them.
Mhm.
So that's gonna be the number one thing that the LSP does, is make sure that they're uploading everything that both departments need. We cannot fall out of compliance anymore. It's ridiculous that we have fallen out of compliance.
So I think I would suggest that you authorize me to receive a scope of services from PAR regarding utilizing an LSP for a dual purpose to evaluate, overarching to get this project in compliance and by evaluating marine uses as well as public use on the south side. So I think that's the first step. You authorize me to accept or obtain a scope of services for the purposes of complying with DEP and EPA.
First and
Anticipated
foremost.
non-compliance letter.
I would make a motion to that effect.
Yeah, and I think it should include the change of use, so that way we're not paying double that later. Like,
Do we
we'll
wanna
have
break
it-
It'll be a
It'll be a little bit
phases?
more, it'll be
we
over
wanna-
the 30,000.
It'll be three-prong, as she said. It'll be the compliance issue first and foremost.
As long as we set priority to getting compliance, and again, I think I mentioned earlier that I think it's important that we maintain continuity here, so we can try to use whatever data that it's valid,
Right.
that is available, if valid.
Yeah, correct.
Because if we have to go back and dig that site up again to pull samples, it just gonna take us backwards.
Which we may have to,
Right,
if
and
they
change
don't
in use,
approve
if FOF comes up and says, hey,
what we have.
you could put 3 different buildings, you could put one here, you could put one here, you could put one here, then no one's gonna like what I have to say next. But I think it's bigger than a 5-person board. That project would then be, if we can put a building on that site, in my opinion, is for every person that sits up here. It's for the leaders of the city to sit and meet and say, oh my God, you've got 4 gorgeous acres. What's the best thing for the city? And I'm not quite sure.
It
It's
changes the
a
value.
a 5-person board decision.
It changes the value of that property enormously. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that becomes an extremely valuable piece of property for the city of Fall River. If we
Yes,
can
it does.
build on the south side.
That I think
And-
should never be given up, that should be
Never.
utilized to the best of its capacity for the people of this city who paid the taxes and who have suffered through it all this time. Maybe we should do this in 2 segments, the first being the compliance portion, do that as one, and then do the north side, south side, marine use and public use as 2 different packets. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, I think the only concerns
No,
we're
I
gonna
mean,
have.
One payment. but
No, I
mean,
understand.
let's-
The only thing is when they send up these reports, DEP has made it very clear. I mean, they use independent LSPs. They don't have their own internal sites. So if all you're doing is uploading a lot of data, they're not necessarily gonna know it. Obviously, they'll have reports, which hopefully, I haven't seen the non-compliance, but hopefully getting that data will help. But I think they were very clear at the site visit that they need that LSP to be able to look at the data, interpret the data, and provide them with a report on the quality of the data and the uses. So uploading reports and speaking to use are going to be married together, no matter how you try to separate them, at least on the marine-related side, if you will, or the north side that had the heavy contamination. If you wanted them to revisit an alternate use on the southern side after you've met with FOF, and then that may be possible. So I think you could split out the south from the north side if you chose to, but I think they're going to need that uploading of data to be accompanied by an LSP's interpretation of that data and a finding regarding whether or not there's compliance with the remediation that was required.
We have to take into consideration the coming down to Route 79.
Correct.
And the property that's going to add all along that
Right.
stretch. I mean, there's so many factors. So I think the motion that was made to get the LSP, get FOF, get everybody going.
right,
We
so-
need them sitting in front of us in a meeting, and we really need it tomorrow. We can't wait another month.
Correct.
So we could ultimately, if they can get that meeting with FOF in a reasonable timeframe, we could have another meeting before a month.
And yet, time is of the essence if there's deadlines in the
We have
compliance
deadlines
letter.
coming.
So perhaps this, let's see if this sounds reasonable. to authorize the Economic Development Director to obtain a scope of services proposal from PAR for the services of an LSP to meet the requirements of the non-compliance letter from, was it DEP or EPA?
Catherine.
I'm sorry, I don't
She's
know what she's-
DEP. She's DEP.
From DEP. Is that, First step.
I'm getting, yes, I agree.
first
And to
step?
proceed with the
First
work,
step.
or you proceeding with the work for compliance? Okay.
Catherine Cavallo.
And to
Yeah.
proceed, and to proceed, but
Yeah.
that's the other thing. And to proceed with the scope of services needed for compliance.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so you,
So we have that motion?
I'll make a motion.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask a question before you move on from that? At the outset, you said that the state or EPA was going to provide you with a link to all the communications.
I'm gonna send it right.
Would that include everything that they've communicated to us, deficiencies, notice of not being in compliance, things like that? Do you know if that
This
has
is
all the
the
letters?
I asked her to send me
Yeah.
the notifications of all the.
Yeah.
So she's compiling that one.
Oh, okay.
So this is, which I will forward to every board member right now.
And that'll have all those
And
notifications?
her next email to me,
Yeah, yeah.
she said she was working in the field, out of the office,
Okay.
is gonna go back and send us all of the letters that when we were falling out of compliance, she kept mailing that we were out of compliance.
Would those be public documents, you think?
Did she indicate to
I'm not
you?
quite sure.
They would be.
They would be public? so
Yeah,
they can be
anything
released-
from
they
a
can be
regular
released to
time.
anyone?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Kara, did she indicate to you to which address that was being sent, those notifications were being sent?
To our former consultant. Economic Development Director's Report.
all right, so it's been a very busy 2 weeks, and obviously with all the items on the agenda, you can understand that I have been digging into as many as I can, and and just ticking away. I think this is not in no particular order, but first on my agenda is to let you know that I'm working with the city and with Mike regarding the Massachusetts Office of Business Development vacant storefront program. We're going to be hopefully applying to them. So a program overview is the Economic Development Incentive Program, the EDI program, which you all are aware of, is allowed to use EDIP tax credits to encourage new occupancy of vacant downtown storefronts. The EACC, the Economic Assistance Coordinating Council, has come up with regulations regarding the same. So in essence, this initiative will make refundable EDIP tax credits available to an applicant business approved by the EACC. A recipient of tax credits submits personal income tax and business excise tax to the DOR. The tax credits will reduce the recipient's tax liability. And so instead of, I don't really get into the details, but it does require, as a condition precedent for a business to access these tax credits and apply on a project-by-project basis, the city has to apply by providing a list of all vacant storefronts, and that is something that I am working on with the city in order so the businesses within Fall River can take advantage of this new tax incentive program. The details of which, second point, will be posted on our website. Actually, previously on our website, we had inaccurate information. The contact was still your former consultant until, as of last week, when I asked the city IT director to amend it. It also changes, it will change, I didn't update it yet, but the list of responsibilities that the RDA does, I think the most important thing I did was to make sure that the contact information was accurate. So it now has the new telephone number for the RDA. This will be a work in progress, so I would really appreciate your input. We're talking with the IT department about getting a separate domain, and we have a separate email exchange now. So it's actually a function of when anyone wants to reach the RDA, they'll know whom to contact. Information to the public will be much more accessible. I will hopefully get to the point where we can have links to our agendas, links to our minutes of our meeting, and all public records. So that should, that will be, again, in the works. And then links to our properties, once I get a complete inventory. So I'm working on that. So with that being said, the other,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do we have, can we let the public know what that website is? Because there are people that do watch the meetings after the fact, so that they're aware of what the website is in case they want to access it.
well, right now, we are utilizing the Fall River, the city of Fall River has a page for you all. Eventually, we will be expanding that information. So it is the www.fallriverma.org/Fall River Redevelopment Authority. That currently is available and will be expanded, become user-friendly, become professional based upon your requirements and your preferences.
Great, thank you.
So your input will be very helpful. I do not know, this is again administrative thing. I do not know if you have a tax exempt certificate in order to be able to purchase just even a tape recorder for these meetings without having to pay sales tax. So I'm hoping that I can ask you to vote to authorize the executive director to complete any well, actually, if you want to be specific, to apply for a tax exempt status for the RDA authority for the purposes of not paying sales tax as a nonprofit organization.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
This is all administrative, I'm bore you with the details. But again, every penny saves money and every penny gets to be reinvested for the residents. And there is an 04 number. Thank you. Vacant storefronts, my report. So, the good news, in addition to being here and working with all of you, we've had many inquiries from companies looking for property within the city. That includes a company with up to 400 jobs, company based in Rhode Island. There are 2 Fall River companies that are looking to expand. I have a number of smaller companies looking for assistance and, again, business resources. Have already talked to everyone, and we'll be following up with the details at that time. We have had 2 inquiries from property developers looking for property in our opportunity zones. As you know, that it's a federal program for companies to take advantage of a new federal tax program where they can defer long-term capital gains. Again, let me put it over here, if you want a briefing on that at any point in time, or eventually we'll do that to you. And then let's talk about another briefing. My goal is to brief you on the status of the offshore wind industry within Massachusetts. And those other companies, we have other companies that are interested in locating in Massachusetts. So the context of that is that if you go on the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center website, and I can send you all these links as a follow-up, you will see that they have a directory, it's called a supply chain directory. Just Google that. There are a number of Fall River companies, other companies based in Fall River that are interested in getting into this field. Either they're currently within the space, they want to get in that space a little bit larger, or they're just interested in expanding their current product line to accommodate this industry. It is projected to be a $2 billion industry. As you know, that Massachusetts was on the forefront. We are having the first US-based large-scale commercial wind farm 14 miles south of the vineyard. It will connect power up in this area, and that in and of itself, the Mass Clean Energy Center, again, has been orchestrating this. But we already know that we have Fall River companies that we need to reach out and contact them and support them in addition to the efforts of the Clean Energy Center. So that will be at another meeting. Just so you know, I have spoken with Mike Dion, I'm changing subjects now, for the credits from the CDBG funds in terms of, for every job that we create, that we are, the RDA is reimbursed, I don't want to say reimbursed, but is given us this
Credit, offset your funding.
Thank you, the right terminology. Thank you, Kathy. I am, again, going to wrap my arms around it. That requires an agreement between a business and the RDA for deliverables of a number of jobs. Again, I don't have any records from the previous administrator. And my job is to make sure that we are in compliance with the jobs that happened within the appropriate time period, and I will promise you that I will make sure that we will be in compliance moving forward. We do not have to grant a business tax exempt, tax increment financing or special tax exempt, special tax assessment in order to get credit for these jobs. It's just our assistance and support of these businesses, so that's also on the table. And I think, just as a wrap-up,
Don't forget this one.
yeah, I will get to that. Just in terms of administration, I am tackling first the budget, the money, accounting for everything coming in and going out and presenting it in a format that you and the general public obviously will understand quickly at your fingertips. So I'm going line by line. Secondly, my next goal is to work, obviously communicate directly with the businesses that are contacting us so nobody feels left out, letting them know that we are open for business, available for business, ready to do business. Third is, again, is just this project by project. So I'm relying upon all of you. Don't guess that I know. If you think that it's information that I could use, if it's, I'll just take it all in. So slowly, piecemeal, we'll work forward. And if you want to set a different level of priorities, just let me know. So with that being said, when I said get our financial house in order, my first order of business was to see what properties the RDA owned and was responsible for, and how that was being administered or not administered. So I have met with the previous company engaged to market the South Coast Life Science Park. And based upon the information that I've given you in your packet, I think that we need to go in a new direction. I think that it's important, given the size, the value, and I would just simply ask you to authorize the Economic Development Director to mutually terminate the agreement between Hunneman and the RDA for the reasons
You presented to us.
that I presented to the board.
Anybody have any questions about that?
I don't. I don't.
When
Gloria?
did we renew that contract? Wasn't that just in the spring?
I think it was January.
January?
Yeah.
January.
Yeah, so,
Funny how
And that was a
we presented that.
12-month contract,
I know it
correct?
was
36 months.
Oh, it was 36, what I think for.
Is there any clause in that contract that if we terminate the agreement today, is there going to be litigation?
Well, this is mutual termination.
That's why it would be a
Both
mutual agreement. We had to sit down, and I think
there's a provision
the
that allows
parties
both sides.
recognize that we clear the slate and we can move forward. It doesn't mean that we can't move forward together.
Okay.
So there are outstanding issues. There was a little bit of miscommunication. The information on our website was materially inaccurate, so I asked them to take down that inaccurate information. Unfortunately, they took down the whole website. What I do not know, and it's only temporary, but what I do not know is who owns the domain. These are the basic information that, unfortunately, if I don't have access to, I'm doubting that you all have access to. Can't put my hands on a file that says, this is what was done in the past, this is how we did it, these are the rules. So, clean slate, moving forward, that will allow me to actually do the due diligence and present to the board a real estate services package that meets everyone's expectations, and it is actually the standard out in the, so, on the.
Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Do we have a motion for that?
I would absolutely make a motion to that effect.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next item is the proposed intermunicipal agreement between Redevelopment Authority and the City of Fall River. Did everybody receive a copy of that?
Yes.
So just by way of overview, you previously had an agreement with the Community Development Agency when they were filling in on an interim basis with the decision to hire your own economic development director. There were additional services, not the least of which are the personnel-related services that the city is able to provide. We were previously operating under Massachusetts General Law 121B, Section 23, which requires that a city make available its agencies, officers, and employees to assist a duly authorized redevelopment authority. And those services are more administrative services. You saw tonight, you received some extensive services from the city planner, William Roth. There have been some additional services provided, obviously by me, but also regarding some of the financial activities. When we looked into providing your employee with access to the payroll systems within the city of Fall River, and also with the employee benefits programs, the health insurance, obviously more advantageous to be part of a group rather than a single plan. It was determined by our Director of Financial Services that we needed to establish an intermunicipal agreement, and it specifically talks about the fact that those kinds of services, and I think you would concur, I've heard the board mention previously, that you want a clear separation between you and the city of Fall River. This allows you to do that. So there'll never be a question in the future about whether or not your employee is in fact an employee of the city of Fall River, because we have the intermunicipal agreement and she is clearly separate, your employee. We're simply providing her with support services as the municipality we're obligated to do. So we had spoken to your corporate counsel, Attorney Coughlin, at one point. There was some uncertainty as to whether we needed to comply with Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A. But after research and further conversation, the city determined that it would feel more comfortable with the intermunicipal agreement and clear delineation of the relationship between the parties, which again I think is consistent with what you've requested. Just to sum it up, it's basically a 3-year term. It did require approval of the Fall River City Council. It was suggested again by your attorney that we, get the city's approval to enter into this agreement before bringing it to the Redevelopment Authority, which we did. They approved this just last week at their meeting. And it does provide, again, a couple of the highlights. You do get the same administrative services you've been receiving. The only expense that we anticipate would be for rent, which actually had been anticipated by Mr. Dion in the CDA budget.
already
And
signed that?
it's about $5,000, you know, we're gonna do an actual, we have the
You
lease
had the
agreement,
breakdown
actually.
somewhere.
Yeah, that was in his budget, but you do have a signed lease agreement with the city, and the rate is comparable, and the square footage is comparable, so we're all set with that.
Similar to what the Mike's organization
Yes.
is paying.
Right, there hasn't really been any change, you're just paying, which I think you were paying the city all along anyway, because Mike is housed in our building as well. There are full indemnifications on both sides, so nobody's absorbing anybody else's exposure to any kind of liability. Again, no cost for services other than paid expense-related items. For example, Ms. Marasco is going to get the QuickBooks program to do your accounting. She's buying that through our IT department, so that'll be a purchase of services. However, IT support services to her are provided as part of the free charges of the municipality with its redevelopment authority. So you're paying for the software, but you're not paying for anything beyond that. There's a provision in here whereby we will be setting up an agency fund, and you'll be depositing monies into that account at the beginning of each month to cover the payroll expenses as well as any health insurance expenses. You, as employer, will be paying 75% of her benefit, and the balance will be coming out of her paycheck. So the agency fund will allow for that payment. And I guess the last important point is it can be renewed, but it can also be terminated on 30 days' notice by either party. So should there be a change in direction or otherwise, it is binding for 3 years unless you choose to terminate it otherwise. So City Council was in support of it, and we now need a vote, the Redevelopment Authority, to also enter into the intermunicipal agreement.
I'll make that motion.
And I welcome any questions.
I'll make that motion.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So you
Black
have
and white.
before you, Attorney Coughlin has a copy, subject to his review and signature, and the chair also has a copy for signature, so whatever will be signed and then worked out with the city for their final signature, and
Isn't a volunteer? You're not a volunteer like
well,
us.
speaking of which, you already voted to enter into my employment agreement, but it's yet to be signed, so I have to copy it before you go, so please don't, well, you can actually finish or do that.
So technically, she is a
Technically,
volunteer.
so I actually, with that being said, I want to thank Kathy and her, the staff of the city, I'm going to say, one of the most highly professional organizations I have ever worked with. And recall, I was assigned 60 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with which to work. And I can say, City of Fall River right at the top of the list in terms of their
Thank you.
professional staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Appreciate it.
I have a question. Are we changing our fiscal year? We had spoken about that, and then the subject was dropped, so at this point, where are we with that?
The independent auditors are completing your,
Oh, did you? No, I
yeah.
didn't get it.
The independent auditors are completing the audit. They're also going to be asked whether or not a change in fiscal year is doable. Anything is doable, but it's a question as to whether or not, there's going to be complications. The IRS does not look fondly on people changing fiscal years, nor to them changing, from for-profit to non-profit and those kind of changes. So they are going to look into it. I think it would be cleaner because CDA is also on that same fiscal year, but we'll have to get back to you on that.
So on that note, I did ask Attorney Coughlin whether or not the RDA had bylaws. And I think the last known record was they're old. 64. So in part of my administrative duties, I will be drafting for discussion proposed bylaws, which will clean up most of this the administrative issues in order to get things, in compliance.
And up to speed.
And up to speed. Happy to do that.
Proposed executive session. do? John, do I need to read all these, or can we just,
I would go through those, and then we need to decide if we're going back into session.
to approve and review executive session minutes for May 30th, 2019, to review and respond to the open meeting law complaint pursuant to Mass General Law 30A by Patrick Higgins, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation pursuant to Mass General Law 30A with Bristol County Superior Court docket number 1873, and to discuss potential real estate transaction for possible related to offshore wind project pursuant to Mass General Law 38, 21A6.
So we have two findings under C and D. So under C, we need a finding by the chair that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body.
I will make that finding.
And under D, we need a finding by the chair that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public
My
body.
final finding.
So we need a roll call, we need a motion with a roll call vote to go into executive session for those purposes, with those findings not to return to open session.
Okay, I make a motion to go into executive session without returning to open session for the 4 items under item 7.
A second. Roll call vote.
Chair O'Connell?
Yes.
Yes. Michelle?
Yes.
All right, it's gonna get easier as I go on. Joe?
Yes.
And Bob has abstained in a moment.
Doors open, the camera's still there.
We need to 5 minute break.